Greetings, colleagues. Can we get a sense from colleagues at Civitas if they can hear us clearly? On the chat, on your screen, you will see a chat bubble. If you can just type yes in the chat bubble so we have an indication if the audio is coming out clearly. Okay, thank you, Aubrey. Aubrey, can you indicate how many people is connecting from Civitas today? Okay, there's one connection currently from Civitas. So we're gonna continue with the presentations nonetheless, and we're going to record all the videos, Aubrey, and we will then put it on our website and make it available to all colleagues at Civitas. So from myself to Nusha Singh, I'm leading the Occupational Health Response team at the National Institute for Occupational Health. A warm welcome from the National Health Laboratory Services and NIOH. NIOH has put together a series of information videos and training videos, and today our focus is on general work practices and precautions to take in light of the Civitas outbreak, and we're reaching out to Civitas. Some announcements. Tomorrow we are also hosting a bio-risk assessment training session, and we are welcoming colleagues to join that session as well, and the invite will be shared with you. And then just to tell you that during the session, all participants are muted, but please in the chat bubble, if you can raise your questions there, and we'll have a panel at the end to address the questions. If there aren't any questions, then we will end without a panel session at the end. I'm going to hand over to our program director, Ashraf Ratcliffe, and he'll take you through the proceedings for today. Over to you, Ashraf.
Thank you very much. That was Dr. Tanusha Singh, who is also the head of the NIH COVID-19 outbreak response team and head of the immunology and microbiology section at the NIH. We are pleased to be able to assist the colleagues at Civitas today with this direct request for us to run the COVID-19 workplace preparedness session. We understand that there is at least a few dozen of the Civitas colleagues online, and we would like all of those who are logged in. I think our colleague Aubrey has indicated that he can hear both our audio, us speaking, and can see the visual. So it'd be great if we could just have that confirmation from all of those at Civitas who's logged in. My name is Ashraf Ratcliffe, and I'm the National Occupational Health and Safety Training Manager here at the NIH, hosting the session for you at the Civitas building. Dr. Singh has done our introduction, and I will now give you a sense of the rest of the program. First, we're going to give you a COVID-19 update, and that will be done by Dr. Odette Volmik from the Occupational Medicine section. We will then be followed by a colleague of hers, Dr. Ndaba, Dr. Pumi Ndaba, dealing with the workplace preparedness, looking at the different areas and staff categories. So if there is a staff category that we are not covering, because we both general and specific, please use the chat box bubble at the bottom open that up, the chat box screen, pop-up screen will pop up, and please type your question at the bottom. Whoever is sitting at your laptop or PC to which the Zoom is connected and projecting on your screen, that's the chat box bubbles we would like you to use. And if you're alone in your office on your own PC, please also just do the same. What we do require you to do, if there's the 70 people in one room that your colleague Tonani has arranged, we'd like you to do a physical register of everybody in the room. We want name, surname, position, email addresses, and if you can give us a landline and a cell phone number, then we can add you to our database for future circulation of COVID-19 occupational and safety resources. We'll appreciate if that could then be scanned at the end of the session and emailed to info@nioh.ac.za. That's our COVID-19 dedicated email address for this period of lockdown and beyond. info@nioh.ac.za for your scanned register. For those who are in their offices or working from homes locked on, please put your details, name, surname, position, as well as contact details in the chat box bubble, and then we'll have the online register as well. We appreciate your assistance with regard to that. After the COVID-19 update and workplace preparedness session by our occupational medicine colleagues, we will have the pre-recorded inputs by two colleagues from the immunology and microbiology sections. One is by my colleagues Anika Matuka, Ms. Anika Matuka, as well as Ms. Munya Muvali. And the first one will be on cleaning procedures for surfaces, floors, and equipment in your workspaces. And keep in mind that when you do have colleagues that you are advising that might not be in your Civitas head office, and you might be advising the provincial or other levels of administrative and other centers, the advice that you need to get from us today through the chat box and through our presentation, please ask if you need any clarification. The other pre-recorded part we'll have from Munya is on hand washing and sanitizing procedures. You will notice that the NIH team, and I'm proud to be associated with a team of experts, occupational medicine, occupational hygiene, immunology, toxicology, etc., etc. We are not wearing masks, we are not wearing gloves, but we are definitely practicing excellent hand hygiene, social distancing. When we meet in a room where everybody is at least 2 meters apart, it's a large space, and we have approximately almost 20 people in that room, and we have our presentations on the screen, etc. We practice excellent, good, coughing etiquette, and etc. and so on. And hopefully some of your questions around the burning questions of PPE, what is required, what is not necessary, what is prescribed by your risk assessments, all that will be covered by our presentations. And for those who are not online today, as Dr. Singh indicated, we will have those videos for you uploaded so that it can be viewed again in our presentations be made available. Finally, I'll give you a sense before we close today, the question and answer session. Before the question and answer session is what resources are available, which are those websites, which are the hotlines, etc. And obviously on the NIH website, which we will keep on reminding you of, and we will hope to ask Glenn just to pop up on your screen the front page of the NIH website at a later stage before we have our Q&A session, and maybe even before we close, just to have it on the screen as we close our and mute our microphone after the Q&A session. And that's the final session, the Q&A session. Having explained all that, please reminder, we need the hard copy register of all of those 17 people in the room at Civitas, and any individual colleagues who are on their own laptops, please type your name, surname, position, and contact details for us to add you to our mailing list in the chat box at the bottom. We need the physical register, the hard copy register to be scanned for us and sent to info@nih.ac.za. With that having been said and a bit of admin covered, I now invite our colleague from the occupational medicine section, Dr. Odette Volmink. The slides will appear on the screen and she'll speak to those slides. Welcome.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for listening for our to our presentation on COVID and how to prepare our workplaces to address this hazard. I'm going to be giving an update on COVID. And, you know, a lot of the things have been, people have been listening to information on various sources. People have been watching TV. So I know there's a lot of information that you already know about COVID, but this is just to see where we are and what the current information out there tells us about the virus and the disease. Thank you. Okay, so as I said, there's a lot of information out there, but it's important to use reputable sources of information to get what you need to know. And so on this slide, we've given some good resources that you could use. There's the NIH, the NHS, the NICD website, as well as the National Department of Health websites that is continuously updating. So as the research is coming through, more information is known. Please know about these websites and check them for the latest information. There's also the WHO, which gives guidance and is continually updating the information. Okay, so by way of background, on the 31st of December is sort of when this all came into the limelight, and when the WHO China branch found that there was a cluster of pneumonia cases in Wuhan. And by the 7th of January 2020, the causative pathogen was identified as something that was new. It was a new coronavirus, and later was given the name the SARS coronavirus 2, so SARS-CoV-2 virus. And then on the 13th of January, the virus then appeared outside China's borders. By the 30th of January, the WHO had declared a public health emergency of international concern. And on the 4th of March, the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed within our borders. And a pandemic was declared by the WHO on the 11th of March 2020, and in an address on the 16th of March, South Africa was, our president had declared a state of disaster in South Africa. And on the 23rd of March, our president also informed us that we were going to, and we are now currently in a 21-day lockdown in order to tackle the coronavirus in our borders. So with regards to the burden of disease, as of yesterday, the worldwide burden in terms of confirmed cases, there are over 800,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus and COVID infection. And of that, there are 40,000, more than 40,000 deaths globally, which is quite astounding. In South Africa, there has been 1,353 confirmed COVID-19 cases as of yesterday, and sadly we've had 5 deaths from this disease to date. Interestingly enough, and sadly, is that our frontline staff are quite affected, and already we have 13 cases of healthcare workers affected. So, you know, there's lots of talk about the novel coronavirus, nCoV, coronavirus 2. So, as I said before, the virus, the pathogen, the organism has now been called severe acute respiratory virus, coronavirus 2, and it causes a disease. So, the disease that it causes is called coronavirus disease 2019. So that is where the acronyms come from, COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2. So the virus gives rise to the disease. Okay. So just taking us to what is this virus and how does it look under the microscope. The virus is an RNA virus that has little glycoproteins on the surface of the virus that gives the glycoproteins have a crown shape, and that's why it is called a coronavirus. But this is not the only coronavirus that we've encountered. There are many types of coronaviruses. There's apparently more than 40 species of coronavirus, and they've been here for many decades. That we've first been able to identify that there's more than 40 species, and a lot of them are responsible for the common cold, usually a self-limiting upper respiratory tract-like infections. But what has happened here is a new coronavirus, or a species of coronavirus was detected that has now been given the name the SARS coronavirus 2. So the coronaviruses, they are viruses that not only infect human beings, but they also infect mammals, different types of mammals. They infect different types of birds. And when there is a crossover between a specific type of coronavirus that initially the animal species was able to deal with it within their immune system, when this type of virus then crosses over to now start attacking human beings, our immune system is not able to deal with this type of virus, and we haven't had immunity yet to this new type of virus that has emerged. And there have been a few outbreaks of this sort in recent times. In 2002 to 2003, we had the global outbreak of SARS coronavirus, that was the one, which spread to about 37 countries within 2 weeks of the outbreak, and caused about more than 8,000 cases, and was responsible for more than 7,000 deaths. Then we had the MERS coronavirus. And the MERS coronavirus was first identified around 2012, where we had more than 2,400 confirmed cases, resulting in more than 800 deaths. And this kind of was more located in the Middle Eastern region of the globe, but also included about 17 other countries. Okay. So it's very important to know how the coronavirus spreads, because then we can put control measures in place to try to prevent that spread. So here's a picture of an infected person on your left who is coughing. And as he's coughing, probably even as he's talking, respiratory droplets are being pushed out into the environment. And these respiratory droplets can be in the air for 1 to 2 meters, and thereafter settle to the surfaces around where the infected person was. So at the moment, the main way of spread is by droplet spread. And it's often in asymptomatic people, where they are coughing and sneezing, and this generates all these droplets that are dispersed. The larger droplets are not in the air, suspended in the air. The larger droplets can fall to the ground. So even though there's a lot of talk about the 1 to 2 meter distance that we need to keep from people, because then we're kind of breathing in the air that they are they're coughing out, the droplets are suspended in that air. It's important to note, especially with regards to surfaces, that the larger droplets can go beyond this distance. Okay. So, we spoke a little bit about the structure of the virus earlier, and we said it has these little glycoprotein clouds. But in terms of the structure and the outer membrane, it's quite fragile. And so it is susceptible to common disinfectants, and it can be killed by simple disinfectants. There's no real conclusive evidence on how long COVID survives in water or sewage, but it does survive on inanimate objects for different lengths of times, and this can range from either 12 hours to even about 6 days. So the survival time that this virus is viable in the environment depends on many factors. Some of them, these are often environmental factors. So it depends on the pH of the environment, it depends on the inoculum size, how much of the virus is concentrated in the droplets. It depends on the dryness of the environment, the temperature of the environment, the exposure of the virus to disinfectants, and the type of surface on which it lands. It's noteworthy that common disinfectants such as 70% ethanol and bleach can kill the coronavirus. So we know now that the virus, how the virus comes out of an infected person, the droplets come out, it's suspended in the environment, it also settles on the surface, but then it needs to, in order for it to be transmitted to somebody else who's not infected, it needs to attach to a cell. And it often attaches to sort of specific proteins in the human body. Often with regards to the SARS coronavirus 2, its target cell is on the surface of the epithelial cells in the upper respiratory airways. And so just this is a little picture in the corner, on the right corner, and it shows the diameter of the particles that can go down different parts of the respiratory system. And the respiratory system is able to take in bigger particles on the upper respiratory tract. So that's the nose and up until the pharynx. And as it goes lower down to the lower respiratory tract, the particles need to be smaller in size to actually get to those parts and actually attach. So with regards to the coronavirus, one of the reasons that it makes it so effective is that it doesn't matter on the size of the particles because it's attaching to the upper respiratory tract. And so even bigger particles can can get in and are not filtered, such as like TB. TB attaches in the lower respiratory tracts, and so it needs to be smaller to get down to these sides, to these places. So there's something that they call a basic reproductive number, and that is the number of people that can be infected, or the usual number of people that can be infected by one infected person. So with regards to the SARS coronavirus 2, one infected person can infect 2.5 people. So if you see that little picture there, and this is a picture of one infected person, which is your red person. Your red person coming into contact with quite a few other people. But of those people, he usually infects two people. Those 2 people then come into contact with quite a few other people. They then infect 2 people. Those 2 infected people then come into contact with more people, and 2 people are infected. So with regards to the coronavirus, each person is thought to infect 2.5 people. And so it exponentially spreads this disease as these infected people then go on to infect 2.5 more people. Those infected people go on to infect even more people. And when we compare this reproductive number to other diseases, Without common influenza virus, our common influenza virus has a reproductive number of 1.5. So one infected person infects another 1.5 people. With the previous SARS epidemic, that SARS virus, one infected person then infected 3.5 people. And with something that is very contagious like measles, the reproductive number is 15, where one measles case then goes on to infect 15 people. So I know that we mentioned this before, but people are most infectious when they are symptomatic. So that's when they're coughing and they're sneezing, and if we can imagine, there's a lot more droplets coming out. But it is thought that people are less infectious or people are generally not infectious during the incubation period. Okay, so on the incubation period is the time from which a person who is exposed to someone who is infected, and then the time that it then attaches in the body, reproduces in the body, and then the viral load gets higher till a point where they are now symptomatic and they are presenting with symptoms of COVID-19 disease. So that period from exposure to when they present with symptoms is called the incubation period. And there's a range, as the studies have come up, because people are studying cases as they come up in China and Italy globally. The incubation period is somewhere from 5 to 12 days, people actually start presenting with symptoms. And so that is why that 14 days of isolation came back. Is that if people who are exposed, they are separated for 14 days to look whether or not they actually, within that period, become symptomatic. What are symptoms of coronavirus? Oftentimes people present with fever, they can present with sore throat, headache, cough, tiredness, muscle pain, and then when it gets severe, they can present with shortness of breath and even severe respiratory distress. And some people can even go on to present with sepsis and organ failure because of the coronavirus. Okay. So there's something called a case definition, and a case definition is something that then allows people to be identified as persons under investigation, persons that need to be tested for the coronavirus. And who determines this case definition has been determined by the National Institute for Communicable Diseases and can update as community spread, as more community spread can occur. But currently, as per the NICD guidelines, this is the case definition. So a person under investigation, firstly, if they present with acute respiratory illness. And that means they have to have one of the following. They have to have a cough, a sore throat, shortness of breath, or a fever. And this fever can either be a measured fever with thermometer or some kind of device, or a history of a fever. And on top of this, because this could be, influenza could present with the same symptoms, any upper respiratory tract could have the same symptoms. But on top of this, prior to the onset of symptoms, 14 days at least prior to the onset of symptoms, these people would be in a close contact with someone who is a confirmed case. Or they would have a travel history, or they would be a health worker who works in a facility that treats patients with COVID-19 disease, or in the case of a severe pneumonia, where they've tested for numerous pathogens and they still can't find a pathogen, these people would also possibly be suspected of having COVID-19 disease and would be tested. With regards to making the diagnosis, it is a laboratory diagnosis that the healthcare worker would test, and they would test either using some kind of respiratory source, either being sputum or being a nasopharyngeal swab, which is the picture that we see on the right, where they're putting a swab into the nasal cavity, getting it right at the back to the pharynx area, and taking a specimen, and then sending it to the laboratory, and the laboratory would then confirm whether or not there's presence of the virus. Okay. But for the technical questions regarding this, there's a lot of guidance out there with how to perform these tests for the medical practitioners who are going to. There's a lot of guidance out there how to transport these swabs that is being done, and that is all available on the NICD website. And there's also a toll-free number with regards to specific clinical queries around the COVID disease, around diagnosis, where to seek help. That there's a public hotline, and the number is on the screen. It's 0800 02 999. Okay. It's important to know that asymptomatic people are not being tested. The tests are for people who are presenting with symptoms. So this test is not to give people the all clear that, okay, you corona free. No, it is to diagnose a disease when people present with symptoms. So what happens to someone who is now infected with the coronavirus? Well, there's a variety of courses that this disease can take. 80% of people have a mild to a moderate disease, and it's a common flu-like disease. We spoke about the symptoms. You'd have a sore throat, fever, cough, a dry cough. But 15 of these cases become severe that they would require hospitalization. This is information that we've gotten from studies that have been done on the course of the disease in people that have had it in the past. 5% of these cases become critically ill such that they require ICU admission. And the mortality rate in different settings is different, but it's about 1 to 2%, even gone up to 3% in some countries. It's noteworthy that people with underlying comorbid illnesses are more vulnerable to getting worse outcomes in this disease. And these people include older age groups, older 60, 65 and older, people who have chronic disease, chronic heart diseases, people who have diabetes because it causes them to be immunocompromised, people who have chronic respiratory diseases. Hypertension is also being a risk factor with worse outcomes. People who have cancers, and particularly in our setting with HIV and TB being in epidemic proportions, those are there's not a lot of literature out there on these comorbid illnesses and how they fare with regards to outcomes from infection with COVID-19. But the worry is that individuals with these diseases also could be adversely affected. So with regards to how COVID-19 is diagnosed, we spoke about a person's under investigation. They would have symptoms, and they would also have the history of travel, that history of contact, and they would be a healthcare worker working in an environment where they're treating patients. These people would then need to possibly be seen by their healthcare practitioner, who would give them guidance on whether or not they need to be tested, and they would then be tested, according to the guidelines and be isolated. If the test is positive, or even while testing, they would be isolated and they would be treated once they have their results. And then it's important that after they're treated, contact tracing needs to occur. So because remember we said that each individual, there's a potential of spread, to 2.5 individuals or even more. But their contacts need to be listed, and their contacts would be followed up. So it's very important that NICD, which is our public health entity that is monitoring our cases, needs to be aware of this. So even when we suspect people need to be testing, sometimes the first point of call would be to call the toll-free number to get further advice. So sometimes it's important within our workplaces, just because we're devising this training to help our workplaces deal with this. In our workplaces, we need to have a flow diagram that we need to make specifically for our workplaces that would allow people to know where they need to, where would the referral centers be, which are the places that are going for testing, who needs to be tested. So some kind of flow diagram specific to that specific workplace. This is just an example. So when a worker comes and says, I think I may have COVID-19, now what? Okay, the first thing is always to stay calm, and then there would be some kind of screening questionnaire can be done in terms of, do you have a cough, do you have the symptoms, a high temperature, shortness of breath, sore throat, body pains, fever. And if they answer yes, then the other questions like, have you traveled in the past 14 days, and where did you travel to? Was it to a place that is known to have community transmission of this disease? Have you been in contact with someone who has this disease? And where there are yes answers, the advice should be stay in your home, contact your healthcare provider, or contact your NICD and get further advice. Okay. Whereas when it's no to these kinds of questions, then they may need to go and see they just have symptoms but no other contacts with an infected person. They just need to seek advice from their health professional. Okay. So after testing is done, patients always need to be isolated so they don't spread this disease. They need to attend the healthcare worker, collect a specimen, and if it's a confirmed case, you need to start identifying contacts. Contacts can either be in the workplace, can be in your home environment, anybody that the infected person came into contact with. And just to talk a little bit more about that with regards to contact tracing. By definition, it is a contact of a COVID-19 infected person. As any person that this infected person has had close contact with in about 7 days prior to the illness. Okay, so close contacts was being in a 2 meter space for a prolonged period of time, face-to-face contact. This is oftentimes colleagues, it's oftentimes members of the family. With regards to healthcare workers, they become a contact when they're treating a person and they weren't wearing the recommended PPE. In terms of a plain setting, which at least is now less of a problem, but anybody who is seated in at least 2 rows to either side of the infected person. So if you see that red seat, that would be the infected person. So 2 rows in front, 2 rows to the side, 2 rows in each direction, so that many people will be all their contacts that need to be traced. Okay, so these need to be listed for every patient that's positive, because these close contacts must be quarantined. That means they must stay at home for 14 days after the exposure. to this person, and they must be monitored. Their temperatures, they must take their temperatures daily, and they must also look out for symptoms. They need to remain at home. They need to avoid unnecessary contact. They need to maintain the social distancing, and they need to also be reachable for monitoring, because the NICD has a program where all these people are being monitored. So we spoke about quarantine, and just to make you a little bit more with the terminology, quarantine means that when you separate the asymptomatic people, but these are people that are not presenting with symptoms, but they have been exposed, from people who have never been exposed to any individual with this disease. And isolation is when the person is now sick and symptomatic, and when they are isolated from people who are healthy. So quarantine is a procedure that has been effective in limiting or slowing the introduction of a novel pathogen into the population. So it prevents the spread, and hence our lockdown and hence our social distancing is so important at this time. So quarantine can take place at home, or it can take place in a designated facility. And some of the examples, we know when the people were expatriated from Wuhan, our South African citizens, they went for voluntary quarantine in a specific facility, not their homes. But sometimes household members need to be quarantined in their own houses, and healthcare workers also, when they haven't been wearing the appropriate PPE and been exposed to a confirmed case, they also need to self-quarantine in order to prevent them spreading, the potential of spreading to either their colleagues or patients in the healthcare setting. Okay, treatment, with regards to treatment, there's no specific treatment for this disease, but basically it's supportive treatment and monitoring that occurs, as well as monitoring people's comorbidities to ensure good outcomes. And part of treatment is contact tracing, but more in terms of treatment can be found on the NICD website or WHO website. Vaccinations, there are currently no vaccines that have been approved for COVID-19. There's lots of research being done, and hopefully one will eventually become available, but there's none at present. But we have been advised to take the flu vaccine, because the flu, the influenza virus, presents with very similar symptoms to COVID-19. And so if we decrease the number of flu cases in South Africa, we can prevent unnecessary testing for COVID. Okay, so with regards to prevention, I know we all know this from all sources in the media, but really don't panic. Be vigilant with regards to social distancing, cough etiquette, hand hygiene. Don't touch your face and your nose, your mouth, your eyes often, and avoid mass gatherings. If you're feeling sick, contact your GP or the NICD hotline and self-isolate when necessary. So if you're feeling sick, sometimes much better to stay at home so that we're not infecting other individuals. So our workers in our workplace really need to know about COVID. They don't need to know the fake news, they need to know the truth about COVID. We are all exposed as South Africans now, but how as their workplace, they need specific exposures, like in healthcare workers, they are highly exposed than the general population. So all workers need to know how they could be exposed, how it spreads, so that they can protect themselves as well as their colleagues and their family. Workers need to be able to identify the symptoms and need to be told with regards to policies, trainings. What do they do if they feel sick and they have the symptoms that people that are specific to COVID-19? They should know the process of reporting their illness at work. Who do they report to? What are the sick leave policies that apply to the situation? They need to know how to practice eviction prevention and what strategies the company is employing to look at infection prevention and control, particularly with hand washing and or hand hygiene and respiratory hygiene. And you know that they need to know that they can protect them well. They can use influenza vaccine so that they don't become infected with influenza, but they also need to know the limitations that this does not protect them against COVID-19 infection. And they also, well, I know there's a ban on this now, but as you know, things are lifted, the epidemic or the pandemic progresses, there may be lifting of the travel bans. People always need to understand the travel risks and make informed decisions about this. And they need to know that there's a public hotline available where they can have any specific queries they can ask. This is my colleague, Dr. Mpumi Ndaba, and she's going to be talking more towards a workplace-specific preparedness.
Thank you, Odette. So colleagues, we've heard messages from Dr. Odette, we've heard the presentation on the science, the background about the virus, but now we're going to talk about the workplace issues. Why are we talking about COVID in the workplace? I understand we are joined by people who are part of the Health and Safety Committee, Occupational Health and Safety Committee, because although COVID can be community acquired, it's the same people who might end up in the workplace, or it can also be acquired from the workplace. So it's very important that we realize that COVID is a workplace issue, and it deserves to be discussed in the Occupational and Safety Committee, so we are at the right platform. So briefly, maybe just broadly, we know that the potential sources could be from a workplace or non-workplace. Could be from a school, could be, you know, as people say, you can apply it anywhere, as it has been discussed before. So who are the workers at risk of infection? Every person may be at risk of exposure to COVID-19, as we've said. But the risk is higher for those workers who are interacting with persons that may be potentially infected. And as Dr. Odette mentioned, that some of people in the community or some of the people are more vulnerable. It's the same even in the workplace. Some of those workers who are immunocompromised might be at higher risk of infection. For example, people with pre-existing conditions, the chronic asthmas, the diabetes, people with heart disease, the cancers, etc., and etc. But taking you back to the bullet before that talks about people who are interacting with persons that may be potentially infected. Now, in our workplaces or beyond our workplaces, some of the high exposure risk groups that have been listed include people working in airline operations from an occupational perspective, the border control people, which include security officials and other border officials, people in the healthcare environment, people in laboratories, pathology and funeral services, solid waste and wastewater management, carers and teachers. However, there are other occupational categories that may be exposed. Remember, contact with people. So some of the administration staff, the cleaners, people interacting with people, be it also same cleaners in those areas. It could be security workers, it could be transport people, it could be people in a canteen, working in a canteen, maintenance staff who come in and out of the buildings to maintain, you know, various equipment, but also visitors. While we're on the part of visitors, it's just important to note that whatever happens in our workplaces, our visitors, as they come in and out, especially in workplaces where the workspace is shared with visitors, it's important to remember them, to remember the impact to these visitors. Just a little bit on legislation going back, we know the Basic Conditions of Employment Act that provides for a right to fair labor practices in the workplace. we know about them in terms of, every provision in the workplace that is under that act. But also the specific acts pertaining to the occupational health and safety in the workplace. We know very well, we are a health and safety committee, and we know we operate within the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which provides for health and safety, one, of people at work, of people in connection with the operations that you do at work, with equipment, but also this act also provides for health and safety, protection of health and safety of people other than people at work, but people who might interact with our work environment. There's also Mine Health and Safety Act, which is not applicable in this regard, but there's also Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, which we know that it provides for medical cover. It's more for compensation, medical cover for occupational diseases, injuries and disease workplaces. And then there's the equivalent act for the mine workplaces. Adding to this list, there's also the Medicine and Related Substances Act, which is also enforced by the Department of Health. There's also other pieces of legislation. Going back to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, we know that we talk about the Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulation. So one of the relevant regulation to this COVID scenario or this COVID occurrence in our country is the hazardous biological agents, which talks to specifically the hazardous biological agents as one part, as a regulation referring to how this should be managed in a workplace environment. And I've briefly alluded to the compensation for occupational diseases, injuries and diseases in the workplaces. So the hazardous biological agents regulation, we know this talks about how you handle an agent depends on what group this is. So going slowly, there's group 1, which says that agent is unlikely to cause a disease, but it's a biological agent. There's group 2, where this may be an agent which may cause human disease or may be a hazard to an exposed person, but it's unlikely to spread to the community, and there's effective prophylaxis and or treatment is usually available. And from what we've known this morning, COVID cannot, or SARS-CoV-2 is not part of group 1 and is definitely not part of group 2, because we know it can spread to the community. Group 3 refers to, this is an agent that may cause severe human disease. It may present a serious hazard to exposed person. It may present a risk of spreading to the community. But with group 3, there's effective communication and or treatment. It's an effective prophylaxis and or treatment. And for the group 3, we know that COVID might be part of the first 3, but there's no effective prophylaxis currently and there's no treatment available. So if you look at group 4, it's similar, almost similar to group 3, but it causes severe human disease. It's a serious hazard to exposed persons, may present a high risk of spreading to the community, and there's no effective prophylaxis. However, like Dr. Odette has mentioned, the issue of COVID disease, is it a serious hazard to exposed person? It's, we're not sure if it really is a hazard, because as we heard, that 80% of the people who have been affected get mild disease, and only about 15 to 20% have severe, moderate to severe disease, with 2% mortality or fatality. However, the same regulation advises us that when you're classifying an agent, where you are not sure between 2 classes, or where there hasn't been a promulgation of where this agent falls in, it's better that you assign the agent to a higher group. So for the time being, because nothing has been promulgated, we think that COVID-19 is probably group 4 agent. And the same regulations talk to us about how we handle, hazardous biological agents in the workplace. It defines the hazardous biological agents. We get to the classification, but there has to be information and training about the agent. People who are exposed need to know that they have duties assigned to them being exposed. What are they supposed to do? There have to be risk assessments, which you all know we probably have done in our workplaces. There have to be monitoring of those who are exposed in their workplace, who's exposed, and when were they exposed and how were they exposed. There has to be medical surveillance, records need to be kept appropriately, and there have to be means in the workplace to control exposure to hazardous biological agents. And lastly, there's mention of provision for protective equipment and facilities. So what are the minimum expectations of the employer? We know that for most of these occupational health and safety issues to be tackled in the workplace, things happen really when there's top management commitment. And also, the employer needs to provide a safe and healthy environment or workplace through an occupational health and safety policy, but also there has to be a matrix of risk management in the workplace. It might require some resources like financial resources, HR support, and business continuity plan needs to be considered as well. So we know when it comes to COVID that we've heard that sometimes people have to be quarantined. There might be other measures that need to be implemented in the workplace. So financial support and HR support are key in this instance as well. So some of the minimum recommendations to workplaces talk to, there has to be a health and safety strategic committee. This is not stipulated in the Act, but from practice we realize that having occupational health and safety reps and committees, it's always good when these committees feed to a higher strategic committee which can tackle these issues. But other than the committee, there needs to be structures, there need to be policies and standard operating procedures in place on dealing specifically with hazardous biological agents, but on a broader scale also with hazards and risks in the workplace. We need human resources in terms of need people designated or dedicated to deal with specific incident or in this issue, maybe COVID-19. So we need health and safety reps, we need our committees to be working and to know what we are doing. And also managers, line managers need to be informed and need to be working together, because now there has to be a system in this workplace to tackle this COVID or any other issue that comes up in the workplace. But having said that, there's still the issue of service delivery. So within the context of service delivery, we need to be reviewing our risk assessment, and look at who has direct contact in the workplace with other people, who has risk of having exposure to droplets, and we need to have a system within the service delivery of incident management. We have to have a system where there's reporting and follow-up of who's been exposed and who not. And there's also the program of continuous improvement. When something has happened, we need to be able to look back and say, how can we ensure this doesn't happen again or improve on what has been done before? And of course, as part, including this session as well, there has to be a training program and information sharing sessions and presentations on the issue at hand. And some of the possible support systems include the labor laws we've spoken about briefly, travel record. There has to be a system of travel records. There has to be systems of clear conditions of employment. Who works, what hours, who's within the premises, who's not within the premises. And also the leave records are very important, looking at sick leave, IOD leave, and also monitoring trends. How many people are away because of this condition? How many people were actually exempt from being at work and so forth? And of utmost importance is the issue of wellness and EAP during this time of pandemic. So one of the key activities of the health and safety committees and also the management is communicating risk, creating similar platform for communicating risk, but then also creating other platforms which will be available or accessible to all workers. People need to know, and people need to get relevant and credible information on COVID-19. Because if there is no such platform, then that creates room for false information and, issues that are discussed and rumors and so forth. This information needs to contain information about facts about how the disease is transmitted. We've alluded to them. An updated list of affected countries so that people can know if they've gone to those countries. Latest policies, how is the organization going to deal with sick leave in general, but over and above that, during this time, how is this organization going to deal with sick leave? What's going to happen if you fall in sick or you come in, you become sick? And what about looking at possibilities of people working from home? But what's important is that during this process, people should not be punished for staying away from flu. Because remember, this is the mode of transmission involves, the sneezing and so forth, which could be associated with flu. So people should be encouraged to report, but should not be punished for them. And also of importance, people should know the public hotline number, but also the travel issues. And we know in our country there is currently a lockdown, but it's always important that people know, not only for international travel, but even local travel has become significant and important. Talking to the Health and Safety Committee, if we can rewind a little bit and go back to what we know best, the hazard identification and risk assessment. We've spoken earlier on about the virus, we've spoken about the host factors and the environment. Remember we said how long does it stay or whatsoever. Now we need to go back and look at our risk assessment in different areas. But now review our risk assessment. Remember the Act says, should there be change in the process or any new hazard introduced in the workplace, then the risk assessment should be revised. So in a risk assessment, all that we're trying to do, we're trying to determine the risk of exposure to COVID. So we look at the current workplaces where we are in and we say, who is at risk of exposure to this disease because of the work? And then we need to communicate to all in the workplace. But as we do the risk assessment, we highlight COVID, but we also include other hazards that might be associated. For example, the psychosocial hazards that we know at this time, might be heightened because of, the issues of exposure to like long working hours, psychosocial distress, and people, the anxiety and apprehension that people might have. But we should not forget the issue of other biological, physical, chemical, and other economic risk factors. So while we do the risk assessment, we need now to remember there's the area, but then there are people who work in that area. It's important that we list all people. It doesn't have to be people employed by our organization. It doesn't have to be people employed by Department of Health, but who is in the Civitas building. If it's an administrator, which area they are in. Office workers, cleaners, security, and receptionists. So it's very important that we look at all these with regards to what is their risk now and what does their job entail. If maybe somebody is an administrator in the office, but for example, the job involves going downstairs to fetch a visitor who's coming for a meeting, that person is different from an administrator who's basically bound or within their office confinement. If you think of administrators and office workers in open plan offices or people in shared spaces, those are all things that we need to consider as we review our risk assessment. So having done the risk assessment now, we want to start thinking of how do we mitigate risk in the workplace. And normally when we talk about this area, we look at three major strategies. There are strategies that talk to primary prevention, secondary prevention strategies, and tertiary prevention strategies. I'll be focusing more on the primary prevention strategies, which involve minimizing the risk of transmission in the workplace. So that involves our health risk assessment, which includes control. So now we've done the risk assessment, now we come back to say, let's look at the controls in place to mitigate this risk in the workplace. At the same time, we look at business continuity. Can we continue in this way, or we should employ something else to be able to continue as a business in mind, or working, having in mind the pandemic preparedness and the policies in place. And also at the same time, think of educating and training people and as part of this communication, because there is no point in having risk assessment and not taking people along with the risk assessment, the policies, and communicating their risk. So some of the measures in the workplace where management should take a lead on, include the recommendations to reduce transmission, namely cleaning and hygienic workplaces, clean and hygienic workplaces. Hand washing and sanitizing, which should be recommended in the workplace. There should be provision for this. And also respiratory hygiene, which should be communicated wide to staff. How are we going to be doing things moving forward? Educate and create awareness. Travel considerations we've touched on. The issue of flu vaccines, like Odette highlighted from a presentation, that flu vaccines are recommended at this time. And then only use PPE as appropriate. It's not everyone that is supposed to be wearing PPE because it causes panic, but only as appropriate and based on the risk assessment. Looking at the policy review and try by all means to avoid mass gatherings, meetings, and so forth. Regarding travel, we know a lot has been said, but I just wanted to highlight that this does not no longer include traveling beyond South Africa, but now even within South Africa, we need to know who has traveled where. And the lockdown has actually very well clarified what is expected of us in workplaces. So talking to the primary prevention, as I said, there are three main sub-strategies that we're going to look at in terms of minimizing risk of transmission in the workplace. How do we do that? But also taking into consideration business continuity and educating and training people. So the only part I wanted to highlight on this is the part about the hierarchy of controls. We've spoken about the risk assessment, now the hierarchy of controls. So as we know, controls are those measures which are aimed at mitigating the risk from exposure to a hazard. Most of us have probably come across a similar diagram. We know the hierarchy of controls. There's elimination, which is the most effective, going down to PPE as the least effective. So after elimination, there's substitution. So actually elimination refers to eliminating the hazard or the SARS-CoV-2 virus in this instance, which currently is no longer, so it's not really applicable. But some of the viruses we know in this country, we've been able to eliminate completely. We know in South Africa, we eradicated polio a long time ago, but also there's smallpox as well. But in this instance, substitution is not an option because remember, it's a hazardous biological agent. But if you look at isolation and separating, this looks at where you segregate the hazards or targets, from targets. But also some workplaces this might be able to do. But in this instance, remember, the main mode of transmission is through the droplet or being in contact, which is why there's advocacy for 1 to 2 meter safe distance or social distancing. Or the engineering controls, which is another effect, which is much more effective than the administrative, but it looks at trying to design or implement measures that are designed to ensure that we stop or we disrupt the pathway from the hazard to the person who's going to be exposed to them. And administrative controls in this diagram, they are separated into organization and procedures. This talks to what organizational controls or means in the workplace or that are organizational that can be implemented. And then procedures as well. This is where you inform people of what procedures to do to ensure that there is mitigation of risk. And then the least effective, which is the personal protective equipment, which is there to protect the person. So if we think of a pathway from the hazard to the person who's supposed to be exposed, these controls work on different proximity to the person. The PPE being the most accessible or proximal to the person who's being exposed. But unfortunately, it's not as much effective. So some of the engineering controls that could be applicable include reducing exposure to hazards without relying on the worker behavior. So there is no way that the worker maybe can interfere with it if the employer ensures that they implement these controls. For example, for SARS, some of these include installing high-efficiency air filters, increasing ventilation rates in the work environment, installing physical barriers, installing also specialized negative pressure ventilation. But these actually talk more to ventilation means or ensuring that you're increasing the rates of ventilation in the workplace. But also some of the measures have been in creating means of having controlled access to high-risk areas and also surface cleaning devices that are recommended, for example, UVGI. Some of the administrative controls include a work plan of action for preparedness. For example, we are Health and Safety Committee in Civitas. This is our preparedness measures. This is how we're going to tackle this. But those measures need to have clear infection prevention and control measures and standard precautions. We need guidance of occupational health policies. Also, we need to know that there's controlled access to some of the high-risk areas or even laboratories. This is the time where it's not everyone who can go anywhere because we have done the risk assessment and we know which areas are our high-risk areas. And we need to ensure proper signage. If somebody who needs to use this needs to go this way, there has to be signage, no access to this area, and only access to this area, maybe you need PPE and so forth. But that has to be part of risk communication. We also need to ensure that we know the cleaning and disinfection procedures, be it for an office or common area or shared workspace. There has to be specific now cleaning procedures that are going to be employed in the workplace. Also, we need to ensure that there's safe waste management practices and procedures. A lot of people around this time have actually thought of using PPE, gloves, and so forth. But then people are not aware that there are implications, because that becomes waste. Once you have used that, it's waste, and then you have to follow the safe waste management, disposal, and practices. But there have to be a blame-free environment. I've spoken about this before. And of utmost importance, because of the psychological impact of this on people, is the presence of an effective employee assistance program. People need to know when they feel anxious, when they feel unsure of what is happening. They need to know where to go and how to access those services. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Odette, to take over on the issue of personal protective equipment.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, there's lots of talk about PPE, and a lot of the times the focus has been on acquiring PPE to protect ourselves. But like Dr. Ndaba said, this is the last line of defense. You know, PPE, if we look at the inverted triangle on the right-hand corner, in terms of the hierarchy of controls, PPE is the last line of defense, is the least effective measure, because it takes into account people's behaviors, how they put it on, how they put it off, which one is used, is it appropriate? So there's a lot of factors that are at play that actually could limit the effectiveness of PPE with regards to protecting us against what we wish to be protected against, and in this case, the virus, the coronavirus. So PPE has to be used within a complete package of mitigation and control strategies. And like Mukumi said, the PPE has to be based on the risk assessment done. So once the risk assessment is done, the category of workers, each is a workplace risk assessment. It's specific to the worker. So when the worker's risk assessment says it's high risk, and I'm giving an example of just a frontline or a staff looking after people within a healthcare setting. So that's the highest risk that one can get. You know, people who are actively dealing with patients, with fluids, from bodily fluids, maybe from, or even in a morgue setting, dealing with patients that are known to be infected. This is the requirements according to the World Health Organization, that a single pair of gloves, disposable gloves, a disposable isolation gown, respiratory protection, in this case N95 respirators, eye protection goggles, shields. But this is not for any other workers who work in not as high risk a setting. Okay. So PPE, when it's used, you need to consider how you're going to dispose of this PPE, because contaminated PPE needs to be discarded in accordance with safe practice. Okay. It has been recommended that people who have respiratory symptoms, people who are coughing and sneezing, they should be the ones who wear a surgical mask. And it has not been recommended in terms of respiratory PPE that asymptomatic, non-infected people should be wearing a mask of any type. This is from the guidance from the WHO. So we spoke about primary prevention strategies. The primary prevention strategies looks at how to prevent actually getting the infection. Secondary prevention strategies then look at, you know, if infection, then if a worker does get an infection, what then are the things that could be put in place to prevent, further people being infected, and controlling that within the workplace. So with regards to the secondary prevention strategies, it's important to identify people who are potentially infected early and to respond properly and appropriately in order to contain it. With regards to medical surveillance, this is one of the strategies that can be employed, particularly with regards to high-risk workers. And we'll speak briefly to this. These kind of assessments is to ensure that early detection of COVID-19 disease occurs, and then that the patients who are symptomatic, there's facilitation of testing and treatment so that these people do not transmit to either colleagues or whoever they are, their clients within the workplace. So in high-risk settings, and this is medical surveillance is determined according to risk. And in high-risk settings, it needs to be done at the guidance of the OMP, just like in the legislation. And they can include monitoring for symptoms, isolation of the person, ensuring testing where necessary. This is particularly important for healthcare workers because they are at the highest risk, but may not be indicated for other staff. Okay. So in terms of employee monitoring, there are different tools that can be used. They can be self-assessment where the employee monitors themselves, they take their temperature twice a day, they can have a symptom questionnaire where they're checking out for symptoms, and they can be active monitoring where somebody else, a healthcare practitioner, like I don't know if you remember, we spoke about contacts, and we spoke about contact tracing. And contact tracing with regards to workers is a healthcare practitioner who did not use the appropriate PPE and then came into a contact or treated a COVID-19 patient. And so they would then undergo contact tracing by the NICD, where somebody else checks in to ensure that they are not having any respiratory symptoms and checks with them what has their temperature been for the day. In some settings, people have had self-monitoring within their occupational and had to report to their occupational healthcare facility to see whether or not they present with any symptoms. So like I said, this is very much risk dependent and needs to be at the guidance of workplaces, OMPs. This is kind of what is mostly recommended for our high or very high risk workers. With regards to tertiary prevention, is that when you do then develop a case of COVID-19 in the workplace, what kinds of things need to be thought through within the occupational health service? And so things that need to be looked at include rehabilitation of these people, and with that, leave issues. Also, if there is a case within the workplace when an employee becomes ill, there needs to be incident investigation as well as contact tracing of colleagues within the workplace. It also needs to be looked at in terms of compensation. Compensation only applies where people have occupationally acquired COVID disease, and those people need to be submitted via their occupational health staff to the Compensation Commission. Okay. So just in terms of summary and to reiterate, again, what I know you've heard a few times, and these are really take-home messages, is that, people need to, people who are ill need to be self-isolated and they need to be monitored and reviewed. But we need to, within our workplaces, promote regular and thorough hand washing by employees, by contractors, by customers, by anyone who enters our building. We need to look at respiratory hygiene, and we need to be taught and ensure that this happens within our workplaces. We need to avoid touching our faces while we're working, and we need to have, like we said, a blame-free culture within our workplaces, particularly at this time, where we insist and we encourage that when people are sick, they need to self-isolate. I know this may not be important now with regards to a lockdown circumstances, but even as we go back into the workplaces when lockdown ends and there's still infection of COVID, we need to ensure that for this time where the infection is prevalent, symptomatic cases need to stay away and self-isolate out of the workplace to protect colleagues and anyone else that they come into contact.
So colleagues in Civitas, could you just, as a quick check, in the chat box at the bottom, give us an indication that you are still receiving clear audio and clear visual from us. If you could just go down to the chat bubble at the bottom and indicate that. While you're doing that, thank you to our colleagues, Odette and Pumi from the Occupational Medicine section of the NIH. And they've covered in detail for you as health and safety guardians within the COVID-19 pandemic and national disaster lockdown scenarios. Keeping in mind also you need to prepare for the return to work scenario of those who are working at home and those who are in self-isolation or in compulsory quarantine. You've got to prepare your workplace for the return of those workers who are not currently part of the essential services category. So if you could just indicate, Glenn, I didn't monitor, did you indicate that there's no online? In the chat box? Okay, thank you, Aubrey. Aubrey's responded that everything is clear and so on. So that was covering COVID-19 update. That was also covering the workplace preparedness and looking at different areas and staff. Very importantly, I think the risk assessment was emphasized. You need to have a new COVID-19 appropriate risk assessment conducted for your workplace and any other National Department of Health or other workplaces that you are responsible for, either as occupational health and safety, stakeholders and role players, as well as those responsible for health and wellness, and as well as occupational health and safety practitioners and nursing practitioners in your context. Now, you have had, I think, a clear indication that from a legal framework point of view, all the role players, the stakeholders within the occupational health and safety management system must follow the prescriptions of the Occupational Health and Safety Act and all the regulations, specifically the regulations for hazardous biological agents, which has been referred to by my colleagues. And then just as an added reminder before we move to the next section, and that section is a pre-recorded video by our colleague, Ms. Monica Matuka from the immunology section. Please, the chat box at the bottom. If you are logged on your individual laptop, your individual PC, please type your title, name, surname, email, and other contact details like cell phone numbers. We will also be, hopefully, be sending out soon bulk SMSs for notification with the Zoom link indicators. Please do that if you're individual. For those who are in the room with the 70 people, we still require your hard copy attendance register with all the details, and needs to be scanned and emailed to info@nih.ac.za. So over to my colleague Glenn, who's now going to activate the session pre-recorded by Ms. Monica Matuka, cleaning procedures for surfaces, floors, and equipment. Now keep in mind that we do have generic graphics in our presentations and generic references sometimes to clinical settings, people working in the hospitals that falls under the national department. If you have a responsibility to provide guidance and information to colleagues that are under the National Department of Health and Civitas, please consider these slides and presentations to have it to share this information beyond just the head office. I am now asking Glenn just to start the session on cleaning procedures for surfaces, floors, and equipment.
So before we begin, we must be able to differentiate between the two terms, cleaning and disinfection. Cleaning is removal of foreign material or impurities from surfaces. It makes use of detergent or enzymatic cleaners and water. It does not kill germs necessarily, but it lowers the risk of spreading the infection. Whereas disinfection uses chemicals to kill microbes on the surfaces, but it does not necessarily clean dirty surfaces. It kills those germs on surfaces after cleaning and can further lower the risk of spreading the infection. The use of correct disinfectant is critical in this instance to prevent and reduce the spread of disease, which is COVID-19 in this instance. Disinfectants may not work on all surfaces because you get porous surfaces, you get semi-porous, and then you get non-porous surfaces. Non-porous surfaces are those that are likely to use disinfectants on, whereas other surfaces such as semi-porous may require surface disinfection devices such as your UVGI, and then porous surfaces such as your carpets may require steam cleaning. So you get different types of disinfection. You can either autoclave, which is the steam sterilization, or some even uses chemical vapor, such as your ethylene oxide or hydrogen peroxide. Dry heat can also be used for items that are heat stable. Some disinfectants can, however, be toxic, so it is important to conduct your risk assessment. When you conduct a risk assessment for COVID-19, take into consideration the disinfectants that are being used to disinfect that virus. So staff must be trained on how to use these chemicals, and they must also be informed of hazards and risks that they can be exposed to. It's important for facilities or settings to have their own standard operating procedures, which will inform employees of what procedures of decontamination or disinfection are in place, and must include information on the type of chemicals used and for which purposes they must be used for, in order to avoid employees to interchangeably use disinfectants and apply them only for the purpose that they are not supposed to be used. These disinfectants can also be very expensive. Therefore, procurement or finance department must be involved during discussions or planning for this standard operating procedures. For independent practice, you need to think of budget of disinfectants that will need to be used in your setting. The World Health Organization and Center for Disease Control and Prevention recommend that appropriate disinfectants with proven activity against envelope viruses such as your coronavirus be used to minimize the risk of transmission of COVID-19. And examples of such active ingredients that should be in the composition of the relevant disinfectants include hypochlorite, commonly known as bleach or jig, alcohol, and which should be at least 60%, but preferably 70%, as we know that the highly concentrated the disinfectant is, the more effective it can be. The other one is hydrogen peroxide, phenols, and quaternary ammonium compounds. Disinfectants can either come concentrated, meaning that they can be undiluted, so you need to dilute them with water or recommended solution before use, or they can come diluted already as ready-to-use solutions. So these active ingredients in different disinfectants can either be individual ingredient, or they can come in combination of either 2 or 3 active ingredients to boost the activity of the disinfectant. So that information will be shown on the label of the bottle of the composition of a specific disinfectant. Manufacturer instructions needs to be followed at all times, or the label on the container must be read and understood and must be followed in preparation and in application of the specific disinfectant. These chemicals cannot be used interchangeably, so it depends on the supplier which manufactures a certain disinfectant. For surface disinfection, they can come in the form of liquids, as mentioned, either concentrated or diluted, or powder form, which needs to be diluted further to form a solution, as well as surface wipes, which are usually not recommended for reasons such as that they can dry out quicker, therefore can impact on the contact time between the wipe and the surface area, thus compromising the disinfection procedure of the killing of the microorganism on the surface. Frequently touched surfaces such as shared equipment, your door handles, desks or tables, chairside or rails, computers, X-ray equipment, and so on must be disinfected regularly. And for hand sanitizers, sanitation, or for hand cleaning, antimicrobial soaps can be used. However, ordinary soaps are also as effective. Antimicrobial soaps have been shown to be effective for those organisms that are resistant. However, coronavirus has not been shown to be resistant. Therefore, an ordinary soaps can be used, and then with proper hand wash technique for 20 seconds. Hand gels can also be used where there is no access to water, especially, and then the wipes can also be used. But hand wash forms the most cost-effective and the basic principle for hand hygiene. Hands must be cleaned at the door and at regular intervals. So in your work setting, you will determine how frequent you will be cleaning your hands, depending on the activity that you do, depending on what you touch. The potentially contaminated areas, always make sure you clean your hands afterwards. When applying hands to clean areas or clean procedures, make sure you wash your hands or you decontaminate your hands before, for example, patient care or before eating or drinking. Gels must always be allowed to dry after application, and there is no rinsing required when using a gel. As mentioned, proper hand wash technique as recommended by WHO must be used or followed. There are a lot of resources on the WHO website, posters on how to conduct hand wash, on NIOH website, as well as on NICD and other websites on how to wash your hands. Dirty surfaces must be cleaned with detergent or soap with water before the disinfection procedure takes place. In some areas or facilities, for example, healthcare, protective barriers can be used to cover surfaces, especially those surfaces that can be difficult to decontaminate. So those are easily to use because they can be removed after the procedure and then can be disposed of without risking contamination. Disposable gloves must be worn when cleaning and disinfecting surfaces and also be disposed of after cleaning. But when reusable gloves are used, they should be dedicated to an area or an activity. They shouldn't be used in any other area in order to prevent cross-contamination. And the reusable gloves must also be disinfected by soaking it in a solution containing the disinfectant that is used for decontamination, and the gloves must be dried before use. Alternatively, an extra pair of gloves can be provided to the user while waiting for the other gloves to dry. Adequate supply of cleaning materials must be ensured by the employer for healthy hygiene practices. And all this must be accessible in patient care areas, for example, and change rooms where the employee would change into their own clothes and leave the contaminated clothes in that area. If it's not the healthcare settings, it must be accessible in wherever the task is taking place to avoid moving from one area to another, as that poses a risk of transfer of microorganisms or this virus for that matter to other areas, exposing other workers to the virus. That should be avoided. There are factors that affect the efficacy of the disinfectants, and that depends on, firstly, the concentration used, the amount of disinfectant used, diluted in the amount of volume used. That will be determined by the manufacturer. So instructions on the product label or from the MSDS or any other manual that comes with the chemical must be followed. Some chemicals will show their effectiveness on the containers. For example, it will tell you it is 99.9% effective. Also, to emphasize on this point, the user has the right to ask the supplier of the results of the effectiveness test, on how the test was conducted, which organisms were used to test the effectiveness of this solution or chemical, because you need to know, for example, if it will be able to kill the coronavirus. Although there may not be information on the coronavirus at the moment, effectiveness, but the CDC have, and the EPA have done experiments which has proven that if the disinfectant has worked for MERS, for example, and SARS, they call those emerging pathogens. If it has been tested against those pathogens, it is likely to work with the coronavirus. as they all come from the same family. So the ingredients of the disinfectant is also important. As mentioned earlier, you have to look at the active ingredient that can kill the coronavirus, as recommended by WHO. Storage conditions. Temperature, for example, can affect the activity of the disinfectant. The method being used can differ by supplier, so they mustn't be used interchangeably between various disinfectants. A specific method must be followed for a specific product as stated by the manufacturer. Volume used is also important in the effectiveness of the disinfectant to be used. For example, 2 ml for hand gel is sufficient to decontaminate hands as recommended by the supplier. Contact time, which is the time it takes for the disinfectant to come into contact with the surface, is important, as different chemicals can respond differently to microorganisms. So depending on your activity, the quicker you want to get your work done or the procedure done, then you may want to choose shorter contact time, which is 1 minute, which is likely to have the higher concentration of your disinfectant, as compared to those slow activities where you have time, then you can use the longer contact time of 10 minutes. pH have been shown to improve microbial activity of certain disinfectants, such as, or ingredients such as your quaternary ammonium compounds, whereas it can decrease microbial activity of phenols and hypochlorite solutions, for example. The location of microorganisms also is critical, as some microorganisms can hide between the grooves or the joints of certain items, where here then you'll probably need to soak the entire item into a disinfectant solution already mixed, or you may want to dismantle the item into pieces, soak it for the recommended time, dry it out, and assemble it again. Relative humidity also can affect the activity of the disinfectant when gaseous disinfectants are used, for example, in rooms, bigger rooms, where they use vaporized disinfectants. Inorganic and organic matter can also interfere with antimicrobial activity in a way where that it will form a barrier protecting the microorganism from exposure to a certain disinfectant, thus posing a risk as disinfectant may not reach the organism and then kill it. So certain products will have to undergo some accreditation or follow some standards that should also be shown on the container of the product or even on the MSDS. So while we want to decontaminate or disinfect surfaces to protect workers from exposure to microorganisms or your virus, we also want to protect the worker from exposure to toxic or harmful chemicals, because if they have to inhale the fumes or inhale these vapors, they may get ill and they may stay away from work, and we won't have anyone to clean the environment in the workplace. Thus, it will put a burden on the technical staff and also may pose risk to those that are at work. So material data safety sheets must come with a disinfectant when it's purchased, and that will give you information on the ingredients that were used to make the disinfectant at use. It will tell you of the hazards and risks associated with the use of this chemical. It will tell you the risk, whether it's flammable or whether it can also cause eye irritation. And it will also tell the user of what personal protective equipment to use when using this disinfectants. And it is important to make sure that the user is trained following the MSDS on how to use this disinfectant. Most importantly, hands must be washed after using these chemicals to also protect the worker, and then they must be moisturized in order to avoid skin irritation, as we know that some chemicals can be irritants to one's skin. Adequate ventilation must be ensured in every area where the disinfectants are used, as residual fumes or vapor can remain in the air and can be inhaled, and these can be achieved through natural ventilation by opening the window and supplementing it with a fan if present for air mixing, or where there is mechanical ventilation that can assist also in removing the fumes from the environment. The user must be trained on the chemical being used, on hazards and risks, on the use of PPE, on how to don and doff PPE, meaning on how to wear and remove PPE to avoid exposure. So this is just an example which was extracted from the list of Environmental Protection Agency of registered disinfectants. As mentioned on the earlier slides, I've mentioned quaternary ammonium as one active ingredient recommended by WHO. Here it's showing us that the contact time for that specific one is 10 minutes, whereas for hydrogen peroxide, which is also one of the active ingredients recommended by WHO, and the contact time there is 1 minute. Peroxyacetic acid, which is also commonly used in dental industry for disinfection, is also a 1 minute contact time or exposure time. You can see from the table here, following the disinfection directions and preparation, this ingredients have been proven to be effective against the coronavirus, as shown in the middle row of the table. And this list has been recently updated, as you can see on the last table far right. It was done in March 2020 with the update on coronavirus. So this list can be accessed on the Environmental Protection Agency website, a full list which has all different registered disinfectants. So this is just an example of a container of a disinfectant or a chemical that's being used in a setting. It's stating on the label that this is an undiluted solution, so it needs to be diluted further before it's been used. It's stating that 1 pump from this solution is equivalent to 3 ml. So the volume, as mentioned in the factors that affect the effectiveness of the disinfectant, is there again emphasized. The contact time, as mentioned, this chemical mentioned that 1 minute is the contact time. However, there was no expiry date on this container, which is a concern because chemicals can be stable for a certain period and can lose their stability over a period of time. So if you have to use this chemical and you probably will use it beyond the expiry date, it may not serve the purpose which it's supposed to serve. It may lose its stability, therefore losing the effectiveness in killing the virus. So make sure when you get the chemicals, they show you the expiry date. If not, they'll either tell you that you can apply this chemical either for 1 year or for 2 years. So you'll determine your expiry date based on the date it was manufactured, which will show on your MSDS, and then you calculate the time of 2 years period, for example, to determine your expiry date. And this should always be stated in your procedures. This also was not showing the percentage alcohol, although it states that ethanol was used and isopropanol was also used. in combination. As mentioned earlier, the active ingredient can either be a single or it can be a combination of two active ingredients together in order to boost the effectiveness of the disinfectant. So percentage is not indicated, but it is possible that it was shown on the MSDS. So it's important while looking at the chemical label also to consult the MSDS for extra information, as the label wouldn't have detailed information. So lastly, this is just an example of an MSDS which will show you the recommended use of a certain product, in this case the hand sanitizer. It's showing you there, it consists of a chemical nature, your main ingredient, which is 70% alcohol. It's also showing you the hazards associated with this, that it can be flammable, so it should not be used where there is likely to combust. And then the other ingredients that supplement the 70% alcohol are listed there, which include triethanolamine. And that this chemical or disinfectant can also cause eye irritation, showing the various category of the flammability or the irritation associated with the use of this chemical. So there are recommended sites, WHO, the CDC, which has also a guideline on disinfection for various microorganisms, including viruses, the EPA website, where you'll find a list of registered reagents, as well as other websites such as NICD or NIOH, which will have resources relating to COVID-19 disease or on how to approach or handle the coronavirus in the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for reactivating the microphone here in the Zoom room at the NIH. That was Ms. Onika Matuka, having pre-prepared her recording on the cleaning procedures for surfaces, floors, and equipment. Just again, Aubrey, if you could indicate in the chat box if the audio and visual was acceptable quality for you, that would be a great feedback from you. And a reminder again, as I put into the chat box to Lani, for the scanned copy of the attendance register. While my colleague Glenn is preparing the next pre-prepared video, prepared by our colleague. Okay, my understanding is that you have a meeting at 12. What is our current time? Okay, so we will then, at the request of the Civitas contact person, I think that might be Mr. Lani, that you have a meeting at 12 o'clock. We will therefore suspend our Zoom session now. We were unable to then proceed with the pre-recorded session on hand washing and sanitizing procedures by Ms. Munya Muvali. We will certainly place that resource for you and send through to all the email addresses, including Ms. Trulani's, and the attendance register that you will be sharing with us through a scanned copy. And at this point in time, also our question and answer session would also be suspended. We do wish you well in your efforts at Civitas to coordinate your efforts to ensure that you are COVID-19 prepared and can implement all the COVID-19 prevention measures from an occupational health and safety point of view. We wish you well in your efforts, and we say goodbye. But before I do that, thank you, Glenn, for reminding me. There is on the screen, and you will also receive this both via your email addresses as well as the links online. All of these resources are the websites at the top from the NIOH website. And Glenn won't have time to put the NIOH website for you live on the screen, but you can go to our website. There's lots of resources there. And then the NICD website, you're probably aware, the NHRS website, and then your own website, www.health.gov.za, the Department of Labor's website, the World Health Organization. The CDC is also a very good reference. Sometimes it's in their context, the North American context, and we need to do a bit of interpretation when it's applicable to our resource-constrained environment. The IO website, and then the 4 hotlines. Please note the NIH's Occupational Health Practitioner hotline for your colleagues, for yourself, people who require access information from ourselves, our colleagues, particularly from occupational medicine, and also our HIV and TB section. In the HIV and TB in the workplace section is manning qualified occupational medical practitioners and registrars. Then right at the bottom, as you know, there is the COVID-19 workplace queries, our email address, info@nih.ac.za. That's where you must send your hard copy register as well. And on that point, I think we've reached 12 o'clock. We thank you for the opportunity for the NIH COVID-19 Outbreak Response Team, headed by Dr. Tanusha Singh, to be able to have offered you the Zoom session. Thank you for the opportunity. Goodbye.